Hey everyone, Monk here, and today I bring you my PvE DPS build for Werewolf. It's one of the lesser used playstyle compared to a traditional DPS setup, but that does not make it any less strong. And yes, it does have its own flaws and problems, but then hey, who doesn't? So sit tight and let me show you how you can play as a werewolf, be it solo arenas, dungeons, or even trials. Now before I get into the details of the build, there is one important factor I would like to clear first. Class. Of course, Werewolf can be played on any class, but it works best on a Stamp Sorc. Reason is simple. When you get transformed into a werewolf, you lose a lot of class and weapon passives, which are dependent on class or weapon skills to either being slotted or active for those passives to kick in. In werewolf form, we have access to neither of these. And as you can see here, Sorcerer is the only class which has the most amount of usual passives which are active in werewolf form, followed by of course Templar and Necromancer. Nightblade and Dragon Knight are kind of okay, with Warden being the worst, so before you start playing werewolf, choose your class carefully. Now for the race, Khajiit and Dunmer are your best options. Both races have strong passives and work absolutely fine with werewolf. For the Mundus stone, we are using Thief for any group content, that is dungeons and trials, and for solo gameplay such as arenas, we would switch to Lover. As a werewolf, you only have access to Major Breach, and with Lover we get close to having at least 12,000 penetration, which is the bare minimum recommended for any solo arena. For the food, we are normally using Artaeum Takeaway Broth, giving us health, stam and stam recovery. However, for solo, we will switch to Lava Food, Soup and Saltris for slightly more stam recovery. For the potions, we can use the normal trash stamina potions or tripods when playing solo. However, another good potion that you can use in case you have sustain issues is crafted stamina potions with minor timidity. Minor timidity eats your ultimate per second, and this is really interesting because minor timidity counts as a negative effect, which activates the red CP sustained by suffering, increasing your resource recovery by 150. And while you are in werewolf form, you don't generate any ultimate. So basically you can use these potions and have a negative effect on you without any actual side effects. For the blue CP, as always, 3 fixed slottables are Master at Arms, Fighting Finesse and Deadly Aim. For the last spot, we will switch between Backstabber and Weapons Expert. Weapons Expert increases the damage of our light and heavy attacks, which is the second most damage skills as a werewolf. So drop Backstabber for any solo arenas or any place where you cannot always be behind the boss. And now let's have a look at the setup. We don't have much choices here, so to begin with, the one set which is common for any instance, be it solo, dungeon or trials, is Zogwin. As a werewolf, you have no access to Minor Force. And this is the only set which gets you Minor Force without having to slot any skill. Not to mention the one line of penetration which pushes us even closer to the pen cap. You have the option to use a set on body or jewelry, but it must be used on weapons. Use either 2 precise daggers of Zogwin with flame and poison glyph, or a 2-hand axe with fire or poison glyph. Damage difference between either is really close. In all my testing, it was more or less about 1 to 2000, which is completely negligible. The next set for the most single target DPS which you will use for the most boss fights and trials is of course no surprise, Reliquin. For 4 years straight, this set is still the top single target DPS set for stamina. So let's move on to the next set, which is my favorite for solo or dungeons, and that is Vicious Ophidian. 2 times crit, minor slayer, 128 weapon damage with 8% cost reduction and stam return with major expedition on kills makes this the best set in my opinion for any solo content. The other set pieces that you will use are a light head or shoulder of Slimecraw, Harpooner's Kilt on legs, and where Kilt is not usable, it will be replaced with Death Dealer's Fate Ring. For solo arenas, instead of Kilt, we will slot the one and the only ring of the Pale Order. Backbar weapons are more or less useless, however you would have either 2 infused Black Rose daggers, here with the flame and poison glyph, or an infused Maelstrom bow with weapon damage glyph. The other strong alternatives to Reliquin or Vicious Ophidian are Yandir's Might and Sul Zan. Both sets will require you to make some adjustment to your playstyle, but nevertheless really great sets. Now with sets out of the way, let's have a look at the skills and rotation. For the ultimate morph to transform you into werewolf, we are using the Werewolf Berserker morph. It applies a very strong 4-second bleed on your target with light attacks and in general is the more DPS morph. Next is Deafening Roar. For solo gameplay, this applies not only the major breach but also minor maim, as well as gives us major savagery, increasing our crit chance by almost 2600. Next we have his Brutal Pounce, our gap closer, but more importantly the secondary effect, which is Brutal Carnage, and it can stack up to 6 times, giving us 600 extra weapon and spell damage. And don't forget, it also applies a very strong bleed on the enemies. You can also use the other morph, that is Feral Pounce, which not only helps with sustain but also increases our werewolf timer by 1 second every time we deal damage. It's a less damage morph, but if you are struggling with sustain or staying long enough in werewolf form, then this helps. Next is Hircine Rage, our main heal, as well as a primary source of major brutality. Not to mention, this skill also gives us major berserk on demand when at full health, as well as restore some stamina. Claws of Life is our main dot, as well as heal over time. It also deals a lot of damage on impact and is a cleave. So when you are dealing with the trash, this is your main spammable. For the last skill is Howl of Agony, our main spammable, and this hits like a truck. So when all other skills are up, spam this as much as you can. And now for the rotation, since we only have 1 bar and 5 skills to use, it doesn't get any simpler than this. We start with Brutal Pounce and then use it again to activate Brutal Carnage. Then use 1 Claw of Life followed by Hircine's Rage to give us major berserk. After this, spam Howl of Agony 5 times and then we start again from the beginning. If you are good at the weaving and fast enough, you will be back in time to reactivate the Brutal Carnage stack, and do try to keep it up once you hit 6. But if you cannot, then drop 1 Howl of Agony and restart the rotation 1 second earlier. It will be a very slight DPS loss, but nothing major. I think this pretty much covers everything about Werewolf as a DPS, so I'll leave you here with a Parse video coming up. And if you do have any questions or feedback about the build, then please post them in the comments below and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. See you soon in the next video.